The Caldwell family moved into the old house on Violet Hill on a cloudy Wednesday afternoon in early October. Daniel and Mara had been searching for a place to raise their daughter, Leela, somewhere quieter, somewhere with history and air, and trees instead of concrete and sirens. The real estate agent had called the house a forgotten gem, a Victorian structure with tall gables, wide halls, and over a century of charm. It had also been empty for 9 years. The house stood at the top of a hill overlooking a forest that pressed close on all sides, thick and dark even during the day. Ivy crawled up the outer walls like veins. The wooden shutters were sun-faded, and the front porch groaned under every step. But the interior, though dusty, was intact and cold, the kind of cold that didn't lift with the opening of curtains or the click of a thermostat. Lila was 5 years old and unusually quiet for her age. She didn't cry or whine or throw tantrums. She simply watched and listened. On the first day, she walked up the creaking staircase ahead of her parents and paused halfway, one hand resting on the railing. "Can I sleep in the room with the black window?" she asked. Mara frowned. "What do you mean, honey?" "The one that looks like a hole. The others told me it's safest." Daniel exchanged a look with Mara, then laughed awkwardly. "You haven't even seen the rooms yet, sweetheart." Lila tilted her head to the side, her expression unreadable. No, they told me on the way here." That night, after most of the boxes had been moved in, and dinner had been eaten in silence, Daniel carried Lila up to her new bedroom. They'd chosen the smallest room at the back of the house. The walls were papered in a faded floral print, and the single window faced the forest, which now loomed like a wall of darkness. Lila refused to sleep with the light on. She lay down, pulled the blankets up to her chin, and stared at the ceiling for a long time. Daniel sat beside her and brushed her hair back gently. "Do you like it here?" he asked softly. Lila nodded slowly. "It's quiet now, quieter than the city, huh?" She blinked, then turned her head to look at him. "No, I mean the others went back to the cellar. They said they'll stay there for a while." Daniel felt a chill crawl up his spine. He managed a tight smile. "What others, sweetie?" "The children. They don't like light. But the cellar is worse, they said. That's where the screaming used to come from." He paused. The smile vanished. "What? Screaming?" Lila rolled over, facing the wall. "The walls remember. That's what they told me. Good night, Daddy." Daniel sat there for a moment, unsure whether to laugh or wake Mara or both. Instead, he kissed Lila on the forehead, stood, and walked out of the room. As he turned off the hallway light, he thought he heard something behind the walls. A soft scratching, like fingernails against wood. The scratching didn't stop. Daniel heard it again the next night. It began just after midnight, a slow rhythmic sound that echoed faintly behind the bedroom wall. It wasn't mice. It was too deliberate, too steady, as though someone were dragging their nails through old wood, carving slow lines beneath the wallpaper. He pressed his ear to the wall, trying to pinpoint the source. It seemed to move first to the left, then to the right, then up toward the ceiling. When he tapped the wall with his knuckle, the scratching stopped instantly. Silence swallowed the room. The next morning, Daniel walked the perimeter of the house, searching for loose siding or broken gutters, anything that might be causing the noise. The walls were solid. No signs of pests, no visible damage. When he returned inside, Lila was sitting cross-legged in the front room, drawing with her back to him. She had a dozen sheets of paper spread out on the wooden floor, each filled with thick black crayon lines. Every drawing was almost identical, the shape of a small child with long arms, staring out from what looked like behind a wall. He crouched beside her. "Who's this, Lila?" She didn't look up. "That's Micah." "Micah, is he a friend from your old school?" "No," she said, pausing her drawing. "He lives here." Daniel forced a smile. "Here in the house, in the walls," she said. Daniel stared at the paper. Micah's eyes were drawn too large for his face, and the mouth was just a long, dark scribble. In the corner of each drawing, Lila had added tiny stick figures, children, floating in what looked like the air, or maybe hanging. "Lila," he said gently, "why are they in the walls?" "Because they hid when the burning started. But the fire didn't stop. So they stayed. He watches over them now." Daniel stood up, throat dry. He folded 2 of the drawings and tucked them into his coat pocket without a word. Later that day, Mara found Daniel in the basement, standing by the locked cellar door. "What are you doing down here?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes were fixed on the iron handle. The cellar door was the only part of the house that wouldn't open, not even with the ring of old keys the real estate agent had provided. Daniel had tried them all. The lock refused to budge. "I think there's something down there," he finally said. Behind the walls, Mara narrowed her eyes. "Are you seriously getting spooked by a 5-year-old's imagination?" "She drew pictures," he said. "A lot of them, all the same. She's been through a move, new house, new everything. Kids act out in weird ways. You know that." Daniel didn't reply. Instead, he leaned forward and pressed his ear against the cellar door. There it was again, that same scratching sound, only this time, it was slower and closer, and it stopped the instant Mara spoke. "I don't hear anything," she said. Daniel stepped back, heart pounding. "I did." That night, Daniel dreamed of the house burning. Flames crawled up the staircase like hands. Children screamed from inside the walls, their voices muffled, trapped. When he woke up, Leela was standing in his doorway, eyes wide open. "He showed me where it happened," she said. Then she turned and walked away, her feet silent on the cold wooden floor. Leela stopped speaking the next morning. "Not entirely," she responded with nods, shook her head when asked questions, and smiled when prompted, but her words vanished. When Mara asked her what she wanted for breakfast, Lila just pointed at the cereal box. When Daniel kissed her goodbye before heading into town, she hugged him without saying a word. It was unnerving. Lila had never been particularly talkative, but this new silence felt heavy, intentional, like she was listening for something else at lunch. Mara found her daughter sitting alone in the upstairs hallway, staring into the tall antique mirror that hung beside the linen closet. The mirror had come with the house, a dusty thing with a silver frame and old speckled glass. They hadn't paid it much attention, but now it seemed oddly absorbing. "Leela," Mara said, approaching slowly. The girl didn't turn her head. Her lips moved, whispering something so soft Mara couldn't hear it. "Sweetheart, who are you talking to?" Lila blinked, her reflection doing the same. "He's behind me now." Mara froze. "Who is?" Lila pointed into the mirror, her small finger trembling slightly. "Micah says the others are waking up, but they don't remember where their bodies are." Mara felt something cold slide down her spine. She glanced into the mirror, seeing only herself and her daughter, alone in the hallway. That night, Mara told Daniel everything. The mirror, the whispering, the silence. "She's playing games," Daniel said. "She's probably picking up on our nerves. Kids mirror fear." "No," Mara said firmly. "There's something wrong here, Daniel." This house. Before she could finish, they heard a soft thud upstairs, then another, then scratching. This time, it came from inside the linen closet. Daniel grabbed the nearest flashlight and headed upstairs, Mara close behind. Lila was already asleep. Her door cracked open slightly. The scratching grew louder as they approached the mirror. It was rhythmic now. Scratch, pause, scratch, pause, like a code. Daniel hesitated, then slowly opened the linen closet door. Nothing. Just shelves stacked with folded towels and old blankets. Then, suddenly, the mirror fogged over. They both stepped back. A handprint appeared on the glass. Small, child-sized, 5 fingers. pressed firmly against the inside of the mirror, as if someone were trying to push through from the other side. And then, faintly, in the center of the mirror, a face began to emerge. Not theirs. A boy, pale, eyes sunken, mouth twisted in an expression of quiet pleading. His lips moved, forming words they couldn't hear. Mara screamed. Daniel dropped the flashlight. The mirror went dark again. When they looked down the hall, Leela was standing in her doorway, holding one of her crayon drawings. She held it out too. It was the boy's face, drawn in charcoal black, with bleeding eyes and an open mouth. Below it, in shaky block letters, she had written, "He remembers now." The key was not where it should have been. Daniel had left a ring of old keys hanging on the wall beside the front door since the day they moved in. But that morning, after the mirror incident, one of them was gone, the rusted iron one that matched the lock on the cellar door. He searched the floor, the table, the key tray. Nothing. He asked Mara, who shook her head without hesitation. "Why would I go near that door?" she said. "Especially after last night." Daniel didn't respond. He was already walking down the basement steps, flashlight in hand. The air grew colder with each step, the kind of cold that sat in your bones. When he reached the cellar door, he found it unlocked. The handle turned without resistance. He stared at it for a long moment, hand hovering over the doorknob, unsure whether to call Mara, unsure whether to wake Lila, but something gnawed at his curiosity, or maybe it was fear, masquerading as courage. He opened the door. A wave of damp, fetid air spilled out, heavy with rot and something chemical beneath it. A burnt odor, sharp and unnatural. The flashlight flickered once as Daniel stepped inside. The stairs were narrow, steep, made of old stone. The walls closed in as he descended, dirt and ash staining the edges. At the bottom, the cellar opened into a low rectangular room with a dirt floor. Black scorch marks streaked the stone walls like veins, and something was carved into the far wall. Letters, words, symbols. He stepped closer, heart pounding. They never left. They never learned. They burned for nothing. His breath caught. The letters were etched deep, not scratched, casually, carved, angrily, desperately. Then, he saw the handprints. Small ones, dozens of them, pressed into the soot and ash on the wall. Some looked smeared, some clawed downward, as if someone had tried to climb out or escape. He turned quickly, aiming the flashlight toward the back of the room. And there, half buried in the earth, was what looked like a wooden trapdoor, smaller than the cellar door, maybe just 3 feet by 3 feet. Chains were bolted across it, rusted and snapped. Daniel felt the urge to leave. Every inch of him screamed to run, to close the door, and never speak of it again. Then he heard a voice. Not behind him, not around him, inside him. He opened it once. He let them burn. Now, it's your turn. Daniel stumbled backward, nearly dropping the flashlight. He ran from the cellar without looking back, slamming the door shut behind him. He tried locking it, but the key was still missing. He found Mara upstairs, pale and shaking. She looked at him before he could speak. "I heard them," she whispered. "They were in the vents." Daniel didn't ask who. He didn't need to. That night, they moved Lila into their bedroom. She didn't speak, didn't cry. She just stared out the window into the woods beyond the backyard. After a long silence, she whispered, "The forest remembers too. They all ran there once, but he still found them." Daniel put a hand on her shoulder. "Who? Leela?" She turned to him, her face blank. "The boy in the fire." Lila began to sleepwalk. It started subtly. One night, Mara found her standing in the hallway at 3 a.m., facing the mirror again. Her eyes were closed, lips slightly parted, her tiny fingers twitching at her sides, like she was gripping something. "Invisible Leela," Mara whispered, stepping forward. The girl didn't answer. Instead, she slowly raised one arm and pointed toward the ceiling. then the floor, then the mirror, like a signal, a pattern, as if following invisible instructions. Her lips moved again, but no sound came out. Mara gently touched her daughter's shoulder. The moment her skin met Lila's, the girl's eyes snapped open, not with fear, not with confusion, but recognition. "He's under the bed now," Lila said softly. "He's colder than before." Then she turned, walked back to her room, and crawled into bed without another word. The next morning, Daniel and Mara stripped the room, mattress, box spring, even the floorboards underneath. What they found wasn't right. A fine layer of ash blanketed the wooden beams beneath the bed, gray and soft, but thick, as if a fire had been smoldering beneath the room, in a space that shouldn't exist. The air smelled faintly of smoke, even though there had been no fire, no sign of heat, no scorch marks anywhere above. Mixed into the ash were faint, dark marks, tiny footprints, child-sized, circling under where the bed had been. Daniel went back to the cellar later that day, this time with a crowbar and a lantern. The trapdoor was still there, and it was no longer sealed. The chains had been pushed aside, not broken, not cut, moved, gently, carefully. The door was slightly ajar. Daniel knelt, hand trembling, as he lifted the edge. Beneath the trapdoor was a crawlspace, no higher than 4 feet, filled with dirt, scattered boards, and something that looked like charred bones. Not a full skeleton, just parts. A rib cage, a single small hand, curled into a fist. But what chilled Daniel more than anything was what lined the walls. Names carved with something sharp. Dozens of names, some modern, some old, some with full dates beside them, dates of birth, dates of death. Others just ... ended in the corner of the crawl space, scratched deeper than the rest. Was the newest addition. Leila Caldwell, 2018. There was no end date. Daniel fell backward, barely able to breathe. He scrambled out of the cellar, heart racing, and slammed the door behind him. That night, Mara had another nightmare. She saw the house burning. Yes, but this time it was from the outside. The fire didn't consume it. It surrounded it, kept people from leaving. Inside, children screamed, and one voice whispered again and again through the crackling flame, "He never died. He was buried. In memory, in name, in silence." But children remember what adults forget. She awoke to Leila, standing beside the bed, watching her. "The house is waking up," Leila said. "It's remembering what it was built for." The next day, Mara took Lila to town, desperate for fresh air and distance. Daniel stayed behind, insisting he needed time to think, though he couldn't stop looking at the cellar door. The name burned into the wood beneath the house, haunted him. Lila Caldwell. It was too specific, too deliberate. He dug through the archives at the local library, tucked away in the dusty back room, where old property records and newspapers gathered dust. Violet Hill was older than it looked, founded in the late 1800s. The Caldwell home had once been an orphanage, or more precisely, a home for lost children, run by a man named Pastor Elian Greaves. Greaves was described in public articles as pious and strict, but other papers hinted at darker things: missing children, locked rooms, complaints from townsfolk that never led to formal charges. Then, in 1903, the orphanage burned to the ground. 14 children died. Their bodies were never recovered. Only one body was found in the cellar, a boy of about 10, identified only by a charred name tag sewn into his shirt: Micah. Daniel felt his stomach twist. The articles said the fire started in the kitchen, but the boy's remains were discovered beneath a locked trapdoor in the basement, the same one under their house now. No one could explain how he got there, or why he was the only one who didn't burn. The building was rebuilt 2 years later as a private residence. Records of ownership grew vague after that. Owners moved, vanished, or left without selling. One died by suicide. One simply disappeared. The house had sat empty nearly as often as it had been lived in. Daniel photocopied the article and drove home with shaking hands. When he arrived, the house was silent. Mara's car was in the driveway, but the front door was cracked open. Inside, the lights were off. The air was heavy again, thick and hot, as though the house were holding its breath. He called out, "No, answer." Then he heard laughter from upstairs, but not Leela's laughter. It was too low, too hollow. He ran up the stairs 2 at a time, heart pounding, and burst into Leela's room. Mara was sitting on the floor, frozen, her back against the far wall. Her eyes were wide, her hands trembling. Leela sat on her knees in front of the mirror, her face pale, her mouth moving. "Mara," Daniel rushed over, grabbing her shoulders. "What happened?" Mara's voice was distant. She was talking to him. "Who?" "I saw him." Daniel turned toward the mirror. At first there was only their reflection. Then, just for a second, a boy stood behind Lila. His face was burned, skin blistered and torn. His mouth opened and closed in silent words. Lila turned slowly, as if hearing something the others couldn't. "He says he remembers the fire," she whispered. "He says it was supposed to stop the pain." "What pain?" Daniel asked, kneeling beside her. Leela looked at him, and for the first time in days, she looked afraid, the kind you feel when no one believes you're real anymore. The next morning, the sun cut weakly through thick clouds as Daniel and Mara decided to follow Leela's words. The forest behind the house stretched dark and wild. Its trees knotted and tangled like the secrets it held. Lila, still silent, except for the occasional whispered phrase, led the way down a narrow, overgrown path. Her small hand gripped Mara's tightly, as if drawing strength from it. The deeper they went, the colder the air became. The quiet was unnatural. No birds, no wind through the leaves. Just a heavy, oppressive stillness that made every step feel like walking into a void. Suddenly Lila stopped. She pointed at a clearing, barely visible through the underbrush. At its center stood a stone marker, cracked and half swallowed by moss. Etched into its surface were names, many names faded by time. Mara brushed away the moss with trembling fingers and read aloud, "To the lost children of Violet Hill, who sleep beneath the earth, but whose voices live on." Daniel looked around uneasily. Lila crouched beside the stone, her small hands running over the earth as if sensing something buried beneath. Then she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "They run here now. They hid in the forest after the fire. But Micah says they can't rest. Not until someone remembers." A sudden rustle echoed through the trees, and the group froze. From the shadows emerged faint figures, translucent, flickering like dying embers. Children, faces stained with ash, eyes full of sorrow and fear. They drifted closer, their whispers carried on a cold wind. "Remember us, ... Remember the fire. Remember the silence, ... Leela stepped forward, hands open. "I remember," she said. "I hear you." The children's voices rose in a haunting chorus, filling the clearing with echoes of forgotten pain. Daniel felt tears prick his eyes as the weight of history pressed down on him. The house, the fire, the children lost and never found. The past wasn't buried here. It was alive, and it wanted to be heard. Returning from the forest, Daniel felt the house's pull more strongly than ever. It was as if the walls themselves were watching, waiting for what would come next. That evening, Mara decided to inspect the interior walls once again. Armed with a flashlight and a small hammer, she tapped carefully on the plaster, listening for hollow spaces. The house groaned softly in response, as if breathing. In Leela's old bedroom, the one she had abandoned after the nightmares, Mara found something. New dot behind a loose panel near the baseboard. There was a patch of wall that felt unusually warm and faintly vibrating. She pried it open with the hammer, revealing a narrow cavity. Inside was a worn, leather-bound notebook. yellowed with age and smelling faintly of smoke and earth. She flipped it open. The pages were filled with tiny handwriting, faded but legible. The entries were dated from 1902 to 1903, the final months before the fire. The writer was a boy named Mika. His words were desperate and fragmented. They say the fire will cleanse the house. They say we are sinners. But I see the truth. We are prisoners here, forgotten by those who promised to keep us safe. The cellar is a cage. The forest is a prison. I hear the whispers at night. They say the walls remember everything. The screams, the hiding, the burning. On the last page, a sketch. A crude drawing of a child trapped behind bars made of flames, reaching out to a shadowy figure with hollow eyes. Suddenly, Mara heard a soft scraping noise behind her. She spun around, flashlight beams slicing through. The darkness. The hallway was empty, but on the wall beside the notebook's hiding place, scratches had appeared overnight, scratches forming words. Find me. Mara swallowed hard. She clutched the notebook tightly, knowing the house was no longer just a place to live. It was a message, and they were running out of time. The house seemed to breathe in the dark. Daniel and Mara took turns watching over Lila, whose silence grew heavier by the day. Her eyes, once bright with curiosity, now seemed clouded, as if she were peering through walls, listening to voices only she could hear. That night, Daniel woke to a low, humming sound, like distant singing carried on a cold wind. He followed it to Lila's room, where the door was cracked open. Inside, the girl lay motionless, eyes fixed on the ceiling. Her lips moved softly in an unknown language. Suddenly, the humming turned to frantic whispers. The walls throbbed with a sinister rhythm. Daniel saw shadows flicker and stretch across the room, elongated hands clawing at the corners. Reaching for Lila, she suddenly sat upright, gasping. "Don't let him take me," she whispered. Daniel froze. "Who?" he asked urgently. "The boy. Micah. He wants to bring me back." Before Daniel could respond, Lila's body went rigid. Her eyes rolled back, and a voice, not her own, echoed through the room in a chilling monotone. "He remembers the fire. He remembers the silence. He remembers the pain." Daniel shook her gently, breaking the trance. She collapsed into sobs. Mara arrived moments later, carrying a vial of lavender oil, a ritual to calm Lila's nightmares. As they comforted her, Daniel noticed something on the floor near the bed, a small, burned matchstick. It was cold to the touch, but faint embers glowed on its tip, as though it had just been extinguished. The house was waking, and with it, the horrors buried deep inside. The next day, Daniel made a decision. He could no longer ignore the darkness growing beneath the surface of their home. With Mara's hesitant agreement, he pulled up the floorboards in Lila's old bedroom, the same room where the notebook and scratches had been found. The boards were warped and fragile, creaking beneath his weight. Beneath them lay a hidden compartment, a shallow crawlspace filled with dust, broken toys, and a layer of ash like the one found under Lila's bed. Among the debris was a small, rusted tin box. Inside, Daniel found letters, brittle with age, written by Pastor Elian Greaves himself. The letters spoke of punishment, sin, and sacrifice. But one passage stood out. "The children are meant to suffer for the sins of the town. The fire cleanses, but only if the guilty remember." Daniel felt sick. He realized the house wasn't just a building. It was a trap, a prison designed to hold the pain and suffering of forgotten children, their memories sealed in ash and shadow. He closed the box and replaced the floorboards, determined to protect Lila from the past's grip. But as he turned, he caught movement out of the corner of his eye. Lila was standing in the doorway, silent. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the floor beneath the boards, and for the first time, she spoke. "He's waiting." That night, the house seemed alive in a way Daniel had never experienced before. Shadows danced on the walls, flickering like flames in a cold wind. The air thickened with the scent of smoke. Though no fire burned, Lila was restless, clutching her favorite blanket tightly. Mara tried to soothe her, but the girl's eyes darted toward the mirror, wide with terror. Then, from the dark corner of the room, a voice emerged. Not Lila's, deeper, older, and filled with sorrow. I remember the fire. I remember the silence. I remember the pain. The mirror fogged, and a figure appeared. A boy, his skin marred by burns, eyes full of pleading. He wants to tell you, Lila whispered. Daniel stepped closer. The boy's voice was barely audible. The fire wasn't meant to end us. It was meant to bind us. We were trapped here by those who feared the truth. But I remember, ... and soon, so will you. Suddenly, the house shook. Flames seemed to lick the walls, casting eerie light and long shadows. Lila screamed, and Daniel grabbed her just as the mirror cracked, spiderwebbing outward. The voices faded, leaving only silence. But the message was clear. The past was not buried, it was burning. The morning after the night of fire and shattered glass was eerily quiet. Mara, Daniel, and Lila gathered in the living room, the weight of everything pressing down on them like the thick summer air. Lila, who had barely spoken for days, finally broke the silence. He told me, she said softly, eyes fixed on the cracked mirror. Daniel and Mara leaned in. Micah said the fire was meant to erase them, to silence the children forever. But memories don't burn. They live in the walls, in the ash, in the whispers. Lila's small hand reached out, tracing the cracks in the glass. He remembers me now, and so do they. Suddenly, the house sighed a long, low exhale that felt like relief and mourning intertwined. The shadows lifted, the air lightened, and for the first time since moving in, the house felt still. Daniel wrapped his arms around Mara and Lila. We'll remember them, he said, and as the sun rose over Violet Hill, the whispers finally quieted. But deep beneath the house, in the cellar's darkest corner, the trapdoor remained sealed, a silent promise that some memories never die. They only wait.